Welcome to Eye on the Illini, folks. This is Mike Cagley, and we have a treat today. David Cloninger. He is a sports writer from the Post and Courier who has covered South Carolina for a long time, and he got 2 thumbs up from Matt Stevens, a man who qualifies every compliment except for David and Ross Dellinger. So I figure either time we can get either of these guys as a guest, we're going to have a quality show. David, thanks for coming on.
No problem, Mike. Glad to be here.
So, first thing I got to say is when I look at this CFP and every 3 seconds a team falls behind, an Alabama fan posts that we could be in the CFP. Can you believe that? I look at what is going on with that South Carolina and the schedule that they played and the success they had. If I was going to go with a 3-loss team, I think it would be South Carolina would be the team I would have put in the CFP, and I certainly would have had them ranked ahead of Alabama.
Sure. Mike, it's been a popular topic around here, obviously, ever since the final CFP rankings came out, because South Carolina does feel it deserves a spot. And you look at how Indiana and SMU played, and you think, I think they certainly could have put on a better showing than that, because whether or not maybe they, quote unquote, deserved it, they were playing the best. They had won 6 straight. They were just doing really well. And you thought maybe they should have had a spot. But the fact is, Mike, is that after when this first started becoming a talk, they were 3-3, then they were 6-3, and started saying, hey, if they won these next 3, maybe they could get. I said, hey, 3 losses is 3 losses. And it's really hard to overcome 3 losses. It just is. So you just have to see. And as it turned out, it wasn't enough. I was at a party last night where an Alabama graduate asked me, hey, who do you think should have been in, South Carolina or Alabama, Ole Miss? And I know you cover South Carolina. I said, if it's just among those 3, Ole Miss, because they beat Alabama and South Carolina. Results have to matter. And head-to-head, Alabama and Ole Miss won those games. So it is a case of where you look at how are you judging it? Is it the 12 best teams? Is it strength of schedule? Is it just number of wins? I'm not here to discuss those kind of things. I don't make those decisions. But I think that you could look at it and say, honestly, nobody in the country wanted to be playing South Carolina right now. So you chalk it up to it. I've been in this business a long time. And when it was the BCS, there was always the 3rd team going to be mad. When it was the 4-team playoff, it was the 5th team going to be mad. Yeah. Now it's going to be the 13th team that was going to be mad. And to be honest, as a South Carolina beat writer now, I never in my life thought that South Carolina would be that 13th team. But it happened this year. They were right there in it. Just fell a little bit short. So they're heading down to the Citrus Bowl, which by determination is the SEC's best bowl outside of the CFP. And they're going to try to get a 10th win, which has not been done very often in this program's history.
And basically, they're a fairly equivalent match for Illinois. Illinois only lost 3 games. They can argue they lost to two CFP teams, and one of them was close, Penn State. The Oregon game, not so much. And they lost to a Minnesota team that is going bowling at 7-5. So Illinois could say they should have been considered as well, especially with a number of teams that were ranked when Illinois beat them, very similar to what with South Carolina. This is an interesting matchup. Illinois is going for a 10th win. This would be, I believe, the 5th time in the history of the program that they could win 10 games. 3 times in the modern era, and once ages and ages ago, like 19 was the 4th time. When you're looking at this matchup, who is not playing for South Carolina that Illinois should be really thankful they're not?
Right now, it's just the one confirmed person, but it's a big one. Kyle Kennard, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, consensus All-American at edge rusher, will not be playing, which, to be honest, he shouldn't. He came in here from Georgia Tech as a pretty good, solid player and turned into an All-American, just the 5th consensus All-American South Carolina has ever had, and obviously a conference superlative. So he's not going to play. It appears right now that Rocket Sanders is leaning toward not playing. He has made his announcement that he's declared for the NFL. That said, in terms of next year, he couldn't have come back anyway. He's out of eligibility. So he has not said he is not playing. But if you declare for the NFL, I think you could pretty much safely assume that. So I personally don't expect him to play. That's South Carolina's top rusher, really the key to their running game. Those are two pretty big names that if you're an Illinois fan, you're like, hey, great. Fare thee well, fellas. Hope you have a great NFL career, and we're glad we will not see you in Orlando.
Yeah, and as of this recording, of course, Pat Bryant, the stud wide receiver for Illinois, is going to be also choosing not to play. And unlike a lot of people, I really understand why, especially after you saw with, now he's slipping my mind, but the Notre Dame linebacker who had his knee destroyed and ended up with a very much a lesser NFL career without the compensation. I totally have no issue with players making that decision. So
Sure,
let's
Mike. I
talk.
mean, we're both old school, and loyalty is a wonderful trait to have, but it doesn't pay the bills.
Yes.
And the fact is that if I was in their position, 21, 22 years old, I'd go ahead and take what was guaranteed in front of me. So if nobody had ever got hurt playing a bowl game, it wouldn't matter, but somebody has. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, but that is totally the case, and that's exactly how I look at it as well. Now, as we look at this team offensively, this is a team that's been on quite a roll the last 6 weeks and has played some very good football. What is Illinois going to have to watch out for when they look across at that Gamecocks offensive team?
Mike, I think the answer to that's pretty clear. Number 16, right?
Yep.
Lenore Sellers. You got to find a way to slow him down because you know he's going to run. He is very difficult to contain. He's very elusive. And if he decides to tuck the ball and start running, which is quite more likely now if Rocket Sanders isn't going to play, he's going to be a load to bring down. He's not built like a normal mobile quarterback. He is a big dude, 6'3", 215. He's a tough guy to bring down. So it starts and ends with him. If you can keep the clamps on him, keep him in the backfield, you could have a pretty good day. His passing has been getting better, but it's still not to the point where it's going to be in a couple of years. So if you force him to throw a lot, he's probably going to misfire on quite a few balls. Early in the year, outside of the turnovers, people said, hey, what's the most consistent thing Lenore Sellers did? And I said, he's real good at getting his receivers smacked. Some of those over the middle routes, those guys are getting killed out there. But he's gotten a lot better. He still overthrows a bit. He still underthrows a bit, but he's gotten a lot better at making the passes. That said, his strength is in his mobility. Just ask Clemson, right? But if you force him to stay in the backfield and not let him get downfield, you're probably going to have a pretty good day.
Now, was that what Clemson did? Because I noticed if you look at the last 6 weeks, a lot of points scored except for the Clemson game. Now, still, South Carolina was able to go on the road and win, which is not an easy thing to do at Clemson. What did Clemson do to slow down that South Carolina offense?
Clemson's got a really good defensive front, and South Carolina's offensive line, while it has been playing so much better the past 6 weeks, keyed in part by a lot of more pin and pull kind of stuff to get Rocket Sanders more lanes instead of having to just hit first contact and then try to bleed through it. They limited them. Those guys up front that Clemson has are no joke. Those are all future pros. They'll play on Sundays. So it was just a really tough time. And I believe it was the second or third play of the game. Lenore Sellers broke off a 38-yard run. I'm like, okay, hey, going to be right back to normal here. He fumbled right after that. So it's okay. So it's going to be that kind of game. Only 17 points, but the 2 touchdowns were what? Lenore Sellers scrambles. That's what they were. And a lot of people have been asking me because South Carolina did lose their offensive coordinator. Dowell Loggins is now the head coach at Appalachian State. And while there hasn't been a direct determination of will he stick around and call plays, will they let the new OC Mike Shula call plays, there hasn't been a determination of exactly who's going to do it. But it doesn't really matter at this point, Mike, because the first page, if not the first chapter of South Carolina's playbook is Linares breaks, contain, and does something. That's the play. The play you call, the play he turns it into. So that's the key to winning. You just got to keep him there. And with South Carolina's defensive front, Clemson was able to neutralize that pretty well. Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart, really didn't get any pressure on Cade Klubnik, but they made a few too many mistakes. They leaned a little bit too much on their running game, and South Carolina's been pretty good against the run all year.
Okay. So when we look at, is there anybody, you take out the Rocket, is there anybody you think could be a difference maker that might make their name here in this bowl game for South Carolina?
In terms of running the ball or in general?
But in general running or receiving.
Oscar Attaway is a kid that they brought in from North Texas, and he's played very much a supporting role, had a couple of good runs, but just hasn't been able to get on the field enough to get into a rhythm, just because they had Sellers and Sanders out there handling the bulk of the rushing game. You have Attaway out there. You have a redshirt freshman named Matthew Fuller. He's a guy that could get some carries along with a guy named Jawarn Howell that may be able to stand up. Also, South Carolina's coming into this game where its leading receiver is its tight end, Joshua Simon. He was limited during the Clemson game. He was hurt with a bum ankle. Their second starting tight end, they play two tight end a lot, Brady Hunt, was hurt and out that game. Now, Shane Beamer says that both those guys have been practicing, and he anticipates both of them playing. That said, if neither of them play or can be effective, Michael Smith, who's a third tight end, should stand to have a big day. Sellers' best receiver, as I said, was his tight end. He gained a really good connection with him. So if they're going to keep that same playbook, they got to have somebody to catch those passes. And whether it's Simon or Smith, it's a tight end.
Perfect. Any issues along the offensive line and healthy, or how do they look?
So far, they're healthy, which that was the problem all last year. They could not stay healthy. They managed to stay very healthy this year. They did have to replace their left tackle for just one game at the end of the year, but they were able to get him back. So they should be all good going down for the Citrus Bowl. And the three guys in the middle, left guard, Kamar Bell, center Vershawn Lee, right guard, Torricelli Simpkins, all those guys are playing their last game in college football. So they're going to want to go out on top.
Yeah, that's going to make it interesting for the Illini. They have, of course, been sometimes vulnerable to the run. And I will tell you that I have been amazed at the ability of this particular Illini team. The concern was the thinness of the defensive line and the linebacker position. And somehow they have performed quite well despite having maybe not optimal. You don't have a Johnny Newton anymore out there, or a Keith Randolph that Illinois has had the last few years to anchor that D line, and they have performed really well despite that. When we look at the defensive side of the ball, of course, Illinois has been surprising. They have not been able to run the ball consistently up the middle, although towards the end of the year, they have been more successful with off-tackle running plays, which has not always been the Brett Bielema thumbprint. And, of course, Luke Altmaier has been extremely effective this year with 21 touchdown passes and only 5 interceptions. And they do have a talented but largely younger wide receiver room, sans Pat Bryant, but they're big dudes. What do you think the South Carolina defense is going to do to go after Luke Altmaier and the Illinois offense?
There's no replacing a guy who was named SEC Defensive Player of the Year. There just isn't. Yet that there is a guy on the other side named Dylan Stewart, a freshman, who has had an incredible year of his own accord, and he was very quiet against Clemson, and I know he wants to make up for that. So that's one guy you got to deal with. And the other guys that were behind Kyle Kennard or playing back up to Stewart are also very good in their own right. Brian Thomas, Desmond Umeozulu, and Gilbert Edmond, a kid with it's not a strange story because of the age we're in, but played 2 years here at South Carolina, transferred to Florida State last year, was a part of their 13-1 team, and then he came back to South Carolina for this year. He's a guy that will get to play more snaps now that Kennard's out. So they're still going to have the same edge presence, just maybe not the same effectability as Kyle Kennard had. But USC's been so much better against the run in the middle of the field this year. They weren't able to get a lot of sacks last year. That's why they brought in pass rushers. But the main thing was it doesn't matter that you can't get a sack because teams are just running the ball on you. A big reason why South Carolina had one of the best pass defenses in the country the past 3 years. Yeah, you ain't got to pass on them. Just run the ball. So they've gotten a lot better at that, and it's the same story up front. Alex Huntley, we call him Boogie, or Tonka Hemingway, both in-state kids, both seniors playing their last game. They're going to want to go out on top. And right behind them is another kid who's not a South Carolina kid, but he's been here for 4 years, Debo Williams, a guy who will want to really play well at that middle linebacker spot. So they've shored up that middle of the field. They'll be able to try to get a lot of pressure on Altmaier. And the main thing is, listen, if you can't bring him down in the backfield, that's okay. Just make sure that you can get him to throw the ball quickly. Rule of football, if you scramble around, you're going to find an open receiver. They want him to get rid of the ball quickly, because casting into this secondary is not a good idea. These guys are good. They've had really good defensive backs in the past, but this secondary as a whole has just played so well. And as he said the other day when he confirmed he was playing, the phrase All-American safety Nick Emenwari does have a nice ring to it. And he has had a fantastic season and fantastic career.
Yeah, that defense has been tough, and you take a look at being able to compete well in the SEC. You have to have a good defense. I think it will be this game has a potential. I think it depends obviously on how well things go early. I don't think Illinois wants to allow South Carolina's offense to get their confidence early, nor do you want to have issues protecting Altmaier, which has been problematic during certain games for Illinois. They have allowed him to not only be sacked, but to get hit probably more often than the Illini fans would like to see. When we go next and take a look at the special teams, how is the kicking game for South Carolina?
If in terms of punting, they've got one of the best. Kai Kroger's a guy that he's in his 5th year. He's one of the best they've ever had. Another guy who's been mentioned on some All-American lists. It's still stunning to me that he has not won the Ray Guy Award, much less been a finalist. But hey, things happen. Voters are weird, whatever. They got no problems there. With kicking, they've got a 5th-year guy named Alex Herrera who's been handling the PATs and the field goals this year. The field goal numbers have not been good. That said, outside of maybe 2 kicks of his misses, they've asked him to do something that he's just not capable of doing. His range is about 46 yards. If you ask him to do something above that, he's probably not going to hit it. So inside, you feel very good about it. But over, that's been the majority of his misses. So if you can force them into a long field goal situation and make Shane Beamer think, he's probably going to say, we're just going to go for this right here. And sometimes that's worked. Sometimes that's got him in a lot of trouble. But special teams as a whole, it's Shane Beamer we're talking about. And Joe DeCamillis, who is his first-year special teams coordinator, a guy who served a lifetime in the NFL on special teams. And they maybe are not as, I guess, prolific at pulling out trick plays like Pete Limbo did, the former coordinator. But they can pull them out because they know, if nothing else, Mike, Kai Kroger's got an arm.
Yeah.
The guy can't throw it. He was a former quarterback in high school, and I think he's thrown for 4 touchdowns as a punter here at South Carolina. So
shades of
it
Danny
can
White.
always be there. They pulled out a trick play 2 years ago for a touchdown in the Gator Bowl. So it's always a mystery, to where it was weird too, because Notre Dame's up there in the Gator Bowl, and you know that they study film. They ran out that formation for a PA or for a field goal, and I'm like, oh, that's a fake. I've seen that all year. Yeah, they're going to fake this. Apparently, Notre Dame was the only one in the stadium who didn't know that was going to happen. And sure enough, there's the snap, there's the hold, there's Kai Kroger throwing to his long snapper for a touchdown, just like they drew it up.
Yep. How's the return game for South Carolina?
It's decent. It hasn't been very explosive all year. They've got a couple of guys back there, Juju McDowell, who is fast, but he's also only 5'5". So it's tough for him to take a lick and keep on going. And then they have Jalen Kilgore, who's the starting nickel back for them. And it's pretty much, they say, listen, just concentrate on catching the ball, and then we'll worry about returning it. So you never know what's going to happen, but that hasn't been something that you really focus on all year.
Okay. And then as we look at this game, how do you envision this game going based on your research of Illinois and then, of course, obviously your expertise with South Carolina?
Crazy things happen in bowl games, Mike. The first time Shane Beamer went to a bowl game, he started his 4th different starting QB of the year. And they ended up winning that game against in my opinion, a superior North Carolina team up in Charlotte. And then 2 years ago against Notre Dame, I was looking at it and thought, South Carolina's taking half its defense down there. Notre Dame's only got to run the ball and they'll kill them. That ended up what happened, but it got a lot closer than it should have been because, frankly, Notre Dame decided, hey, we've run the ball all the way down the field. Let's go ahead and throw it over the middle while we're on 1st and goal at the 7.
Yeah.
And then 100-yard pick six. Like, what are you thinking? But this game, I do South Carolina to win. I don't know if I can give you a score prediction right now just because, well, Cal Kennard is out, and if Rocket Sanders does not play, which I don't think he will, that's going to take down South Carolina's offense probably a good bit. But I do think South Carolina is better up front. I do think that they've got a better scheme, and I do think that they may give up a couple of chunk plays, but Clayton White, the defensive coordinator, his philosophy since he's been here has been like, listen, I don't care how many yards you give up between the goal lines. I do not care. Yards are not points. So I think that South Carolina will have the wherewithal to keep Illinois out of the end zone, and they'll win this one. I don't know if I can say comfortably, but I do think the Gamecocks will win.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a challenge. Of course, Illinois has shot above its weight class or punched above its weight class all year. So it is one of those moments that it's very hard to predict this game. And again, most people didn't think Illinois would win much more than 5 or 6 games. And they managed to go out and play a tough schedule and do quite well. And I think the Gamecocks are another team that people probably saw the amount of ranked teams they were going up against and didn't see them coming out with 9 wins this year. So I think it's a heck of a matchup between two programs that are really looked at as second-tier programs that are moving up in this new NIL transfer portal world.
Yeah, it's crazy. People ask me publicly and say, what do you think? And I was like, look, coming off a 5-7 year, you've really got an unknown quarterback. You have unknown receivers. Your line was atrocious all of last year. And you've got a running back who's coming off some injuries. Look at that schedule. I think 6 wins is the ceiling. But that's what college football is all about. They're 3-3, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'll get an extended December like I did last year when they didn't go to a bowl game. But I know the term team meetings always used when it works, but apparently they just came together after the Alabama loss and said, not doing this again. We're not doing this again. We're going to win. And you go out to Oklahoma, and within, I believe it was Oklahoma's first 9 plays, you had 3 interceptions and scored off 2 of them directly. And all of a sudden you're up 21-0. Okay. And then you get a bunch of confidence. So they won 6 straight. They won their rivalry game. It has been a fantastic season, no matter how you look at it, but the Gamecocks want to make it a little bit better. I actually didn't know that Illinois was also going for their 5th season of 10 or more wins. It should be a great matchup between two teams that have never played each other before. And again, for South Carolina, it's like it's been an outstanding year. And they just want to make it a little bit more before they close the book on this one.
Yeah, I think these are two clones. Illinois has won 10 games in 2001, 1989, 1983, and the year that nobody can forget, I believe it was 1904. They're looking for that fifth opportunity, which will be fantastic for the program. But boy, there's a big barrier in front of them with the very formidable South Carolina team. And I do think this is an interesting matchup of coaching because I think these coaches are guys who figure out how to do more with less. They don't have the $20 million payroll that Ohio State has or whatever amount of money that Georgia or Alabama have. They're just out there trying to get the eye for the right talent and get it in and find a way to compete with the big boys. Any closing thoughts, David, as we think about what's out there and what's going to be happening on December 31st?
I'm sure that South Carolina fans will try to take over Orlando, as Shane Beamer has requested them to. The last time they were there was at the end of the 2013 season, which not only was that a great team that won 11 games, but it was the last game for quarterback Connor Shaw, who's widely regarded as the best quarterback in USC history. So A lot of people came down. It's a great trip. I don't know that many people expected Orlando when the playoff picture unfolded like it did. And I can go ahead and tell you, Mike, had they gone to Jacksonville or Tampa, I'm sure the fans would have showed up, but probably a lot more of the team wouldn't have. But this being a prestigious bowl that the SEC chose them over Alabama, over Ole Miss, which are teams that beat them, that says a lot. And these guys want to go out there and do something great. They won 11 games in a year, 3 straight years from 11, 12 to 13 under Steve Spurrier. But outside of that, they've only had one other 10-win season back in 1984, which is 40 years ago. So it would be poetic to say, hey, 1984, you had a chance at a championship and just didn't get it done. Here, it's not quite that simple. Maybe you could have got in, but you still rebounded to play some really great football. So if you can match that team and get there and rival them in terms of memories, you've done something great. Should be a great affair.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great game. I think two teams that have a lot to play for, and a lot of times the bowl games are something that people are saying that's just something that's not that big of a deal. And then when I look at it, these two coaches are guys who find a way to keep teams together and make these bowl games a big deal, which is what you need to build a program, especially when you're trying to build it up against the big boys. You've got to have an advantage. And I think the coaching staffs of these two teams are pretty good. Perfect. Thank you so much, David, for being.
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry, excuse me, but thank you very much for being on. We really appreciate you coming and helping us get a handle on what Illinois is facing this year. And of course, again, you can find David. Let me pop on get that Twitter out there, DCP and C. So if you go ahead and follow him there, you get your share of all the updates for South Carolina and get all the news as Illinois goes and faces this program, which I think this is one of the really good fits where you get that we're seeing more programs on the upward swing. Indiana's taken a lot of crap the last few days, but you got a guy who's led them to 11 victories for the first time in 100 plus years. They've been in double digits, and Indiana moving up. And I think the transfer portal, along with NIL, may actually help distribute some of the talent and make it a little bit painful for some of these blue bloods, because other people can go out and compete and maybe grab some of the talent that might have ended up at their place, or a player could leave there after a year or two and go find a way to play somewhere else. And I think it makes for opportunities for the Illinois and South Carolinas of the world. Thank you very much, sir.
Mike.
This is the Run My Own Business dream. This is the colleges paid for dream. This is the retire early dream. This is Busey, where your dreams and possibilities become moments through trusted guidance and expertise, through lifelong relationships. Because we're here to help you achieve the life you've always envisioned.
Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of Eye on the Illini. If you enjoy what you saw, we have a brand that we try to keep consistent with, and that is having fun with sports, never talking politics, and not going after kids or coaches and getting all the vitriol that we see out there. We assume that if a coach knows that something was going to happen, he wouldn't have called that play. And certainly if a player knew he was going to airball the shot or miss the field goal, they would have done something differently. So we just make that assumption, and hopefully we keep it lighthearted. We give you good analysis, and you're not mad when you turn it off. Although we can get whiny when it comes to poor officiating. It's just everybody's got their weak spot. But if you enjoy this, you can subscribe to IlliniGuys.com for just 27 cents a day. And that will get you access to all of our articles without a paywall blocking you. You'll get some of those articles ahead of time. And the most important thing is you get access to our message boards. That's where we can talk about things that we can't publish because you might only have one source, or maybe someone is not willing to go on the record. Well, we can get rumors, innuendos, etc. on the message board. And so you get an insight into things before they're happening, or you get an insight into what's going on behind the scenes. Things that, like I said, we can't necessarily make into full-on articles. But the other part that makes it different is it's a two-way relationship at Illini Guys. You can ask Brad, Ked, Matt, Larry, or myself a question. If you get lucky, even our silent partners like Chris and maybe even Carl. But you get that opportunity to go back and forth and ask for clarification. We have a lot of people on the board that we consider friends, and that's because we interact back and forth with them. We think it's a big part of being an Illini Guys subscriber, and certainly if you want that extra insight, that is why the 27 cents a day, $99 a year is worth your time. We also have our radio show, the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular, a 2-hour Illini-centric radio show that is on over 20 stations across the state of Illinois. You can also find us at your favorite podcast distributors. You can go out there and find the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. You can subscribe to it. It comes out once a week, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. We also do a Big Ten show, Big Sports Radio, which is Big Ten centric, and it focuses on the big sporting events of the week, with the Big Ten taking first place in our attention. You can find that anywhere. You can subscribe to that as well. And we have our Eye on the Illini that you're watching right now. Make sure you subscribe to this. You can also go to IlliniGuys.com on YouTube. That is our channel, and you can subscribe to that there as well. That way you don't miss it if you have stomach enough to do the video versions of us. And finally, we have my heat checks and Hail Marys, where I go through some things that I see during the week, and we just talk about tidbits here and there. And occasionally, I'll have guests on that show as well. Brad likes to come on and talk sports. We don't always agree on things, but we have a good debate and we have fun with it. And that's what we're trying to do here at Illini Guys. If you like a brand that people don't take themselves too seriously, have a good time, this is the place for you. If you want some place where everybody knows everything and we're angry about everything, we're not the right place. Don't worry about tuning us in. But you have that opportunity. Please follow us on all of our stuff. And most importantly, if you enjoy what you are in listening or watching, please share it on your social media. That's the only way that we can get the word out there. We aren't a big corporation that can fund ads across Twitter or across the social media landscape. So people who enjoy what we do, sharing that with their friends and their other sports fan friends is key to us. And we appreciate everyone who does that. Until next time, folks, go Illini.